So I took a completely different interpretation of this topic.
Good.
And decided to just talk about things that I've retained from fellowship that have absolutely nothing to do with rotator cuff. So we'll go from there. So I'm sports trained. I did my fellowship in 1995 with Larry Lemack and Jimmy Andrews, Bill Clancy, and Kevin Wilk for physical therapy. So this was a little while ago. So rule number one takeaway was to take care of patients. And Andrews would hand you this document, which I still have in my office, the first day of fellowship, and it had a lot of little rules for being a fellow, and I got to read them here because I can't see that far. You know, the first one is the patient's always right. I think we learned that over time, but we're very defensive with our patients. The second is always make sure your patient's treated properly, and that if they've had prior surgery, you never badmouth the prior physician to the patient. You can say whatever you want to your colleagues in the back room, but you never say it in front of them. Always be open-minded to what they say and listen to what they say. Don't be the first person to make a big statement. It's more for the fellow than for us now, but I teach my fellows that as well. We don't like them to deliver the bad news. Andrews used to talk about being available, having a good attitude, being responsible, and these are important to be successful. You must always be able to read your patient. If you get to read them, though, you need to listen to them. Data has shown that the average physician will interrupt their patient 23 seconds after they start talking. So sit back and listen, and then you need to be confident. You need to exude that confidence with your patients for them to trust you. The other thing they taught me was what we called the 4 cardinal responses. These are in response to patients or anybody saying anything to you that's a little outlandish. And you can respond by saying, you don't say, how about that? Is that right? What do you know? And you can say that, and just like Joe Zuckerman said yesterday, when someone brings him a problem, he says, I understand, but you're not necessarily agreeing. This is a way for you to talk to a patient and say you care, you know, but without necessarily agreeing to all the crazy stuff that they say. And this is something that a lot of the fellows from my generation really took back to where they were. The second thing was to build your teams around you effectively. So you have multiple teams in your life. The first is your clinical team, your MA, your PA, your residents and fellows, your surgical schedulers, and they need to be loyal to you. You need to be loyal to them, and it needs to be a trusting relationship where everybody will work towards patient care. You need your practice team, which is the rest of your team, the people who answer the phones, the billers, the coders, anyone the patient interacts, such that they are not undermining your mission to take care of the patient, and they need to be effective. You need to develop your partner team. You don't have to like your partners, but you need to have a shared culture and a shared goal of what you're doing so that you can be effective over time. You need your OR team. None of us can operate without our people, so we need to engage in their education, be supportive of them, and be positive with them, and not be an arrogant asshole surgeon, if you will. Relationships, this has to do with your community relationships, your relationships with your vendors, anyone else you may be dealing with, business partners, what have you. You need your mentorship team. We need our mentors. A lot of mentors of ours are in this room here, and they're very helpful, and it's also important to pay back as a mentor as you get older. And then your community team means embrace your community, get involved with philanthropy, and be engaged with everything around you. The third lesson was always have a pit bull. So this is all about never get mad, never lose your cool, never berate anybody, never get revenge, and never be vindictive. But you need a team, and this is my MA and my PA, and they are my pit bulls. And they have pit bull coffee cups too. And their job is to act on your behalf, under your name, so that you can maintain your cool and demeanor in front of everybody. Because once you lose it once, and everyone will ever forget that, have people around you that are enabled to take care of you and your patients, and just always keep it patient-centric and not physician-centric, and it'll be a very effective thing. What I've abandoned basically every single thing I learned in fellowship when it came to surgery. There's not a single surgery that I do the same way now that I did then, whether it was knee or shoulder. And in residency, you know, we learned our procedures, our method of doing things, developed some general knowledge. In fellowship, we learned to be a physician, to master a procedure, and hopefully you got a good toolbox with lots of tools for the future. And in practice, they taught me lifelong learning, be able to adapt and identify new technology, master your craft and develop your team, and learn to get along in the community with everybody around you. A lot of other random lessons that I won't go through to save time, but that was how I interpreted that talk. Thank you.
That was great, Evan. Jerry, scoring comment.
That's a 10 out of 10. I loved it. That was great. All great messages.
Agreed. 10 out of 10, Evan. Knocked it out of the park.
No such thing as test.
Loved it, 10 out of 10. I will say for the training people out there, when you go into practice, Evan's words are so wise, because when you lose your mind in the OR, you have to be the captain of the ship. You have to be calm. If the ship's going down, you stay calm, because everyone will lose respect. So remember that when you start.
Melissa?
So I actually have a question. So I think it's really interesting that basically, technically, you don't do anything the same anymore. And there's a lot of fellows and residents here. And so as your career develops, how do you kind of keep learning, decide when it's time to adapt new things? How does that work? What's your advice on that?
I mean, being here, what we're doing, this is all important. But I think because we're tradesmen in what we do, you need to go to the lab, you need to go to work on cadavers, you need to study your anatomy. This was very important in Birmingham, where we were in the lab all the time studying anatomy. I do it to this day. We take our residents and fellows to the lab. But it's harder when you're in private practice. So you need to develop relationships with industry, with the academy, with all the other societies. And you got to practice what we do, because you can't practice on your patients. And with the fellows, we use, the ball handling analogy. You get in the ball game. If you bounce the ball off your foot, you're out of the game. Go practice and come back when you're ready.